Genesis 41:14 says, "Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. In a single moment, the chains of iron shattered. The filth of the dungeon was washed away. Joseph, once a slave and prisoner, was summoned to stand before the throne of the most powerful man in Egypt, not to be judged, but to be exalted. Why? Because Joseph carried divine wisdom, because Joseph had the Spirit of God, and because this entire scene was not just about Egypt, it was a prophetic blueprint of Jesus Christ. Open your eyes. Joseph, the rejected brother, falsely accused, condemned, and forgotten in prison, is suddenly called forth to interpret the mystery of the king's dream. He's lifted up, robed in glory, and made ruler over all Egypt. Sound familiar? It should. Because Jesus was rejected by his own people, falsely accused by priests, condemned by Rome, and laid in the tomb as one forgotten. But like Joseph, Jesus rose not to stand trial again, but to take the throne. You who deny his divinity, who reduce Jesus to just another prophet or moral teacher, what do you say to this divine pattern? Are you blind to the shadows God laid down in advance? Joseph's story is not a myth. It's a mirror of the one who came to suffer, to serve, to save, and then to reign. When Pharaoh asked, "Can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is?" Genesis chapters 41-38, he unknowingly echoed what heaven would declare over Jesus. "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Joseph went from pit to palace. Jesus went from grave to glory. Genesis 41:42 says, "Pharaoh took off his ring, placed it on Joseph's hand, arrayed him in fine linen, and placed a gold chain about his neck. He made him ride in the second chariot and commanded all to bow the knee." Philippians 2:9-11 declares the same of Jesus. "Wherefore God also hath highly exalted him, and given him a name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, and every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord." How many patterns do you need before you stop calling it coincidence and start calling it prophecy? Joseph, betrayed for silver, just like Jesus. Joseph, cast down into a pit, just like Jesus, into the grave. Joseph, raised up to rule over the Gentiles, just like Jesus, now seated at the right hand of the Father, ruling not only over Israel, but over all nations. This isn't an allegory. It's a divine declaration. God was shouting the gospel centuries before Christ was born. You pastors who preach prosperity without prophecy, you imams who honor Joseph but deny Jesus' glory, you priests who obscure the exaltation of Christ under layers of ritual, answer this. Who else fulfills the pattern? No other man fits. No other prophet parallels the pit-to-palace ascent like Christ does. Joseph points beyond himself, to one greater, to the one whose name splits history in two. And don't miss this. When Joseph was exalted, Pharaoh changed his name and gave him a Gentile bride. And what does Revelation say? Jesus exalted to the throne has a bride, his church drawn from all nations. The pattern is perfect, the fulfillment is flawless. And still you doubt? Joseph saved Egypt with bread. Jesus offers the bread of life to a starving world. Joseph's wisdom preserved the land. Jesus is the wisdom of God in flesh. Joseph ruled under Pharaoh. Jesus rules with the Father on the throne. So what more do you need? From dungeon to dominion, from rejection to resurrection, this is the story of Jesus. Genesis 41 is not just history. It is heaven's declaration in advance. Behold, my servant shall be exalted and extolled, and be very high. Isaiah 52:13. Will you bow like Egypt bowed to Joseph, or will you reject the greater Joseph and be judged? The throne is not empty. The king has risen.